Back in Washington, President Biden is attempting to salvage an increasingly fractured coalition as Democrats appear to be on the verge of derailing his domestic agenda. The president met with key moderates and progressives Wednesday as he pushes lawmakers to come up with a social and climate spending package they can all agree on.
This is what a negotiation looks like. This is what compromise looks like. And ultimately, the president also wants to see a robust package that will help lower costs for the American people across the country. You need the votes to get that forward. That is how the process works in Congress. This is democracy in action. His role yesterday was meeting with a range of voices, hearing from them on what they're excited about, where they may have concerns, and trying to help be a unifier in moving the process forward.
This comes as the government is a week away from reaching the debt ceiling and potentially shutting down. Democrats are calling on the GOP to help them pass legislation to pay for spending that both parties agreed on largely during the Trump administration. On Thursday, House leaders remained at odds over who bears responsibility.
Last year, Democrats and Republicans together incurred costs for COVID that need to be paid for. This is a credit card bill that we owe. Under President Trump, only 3% of the debts, of the costs that we're dealing, only 3% have occurred under the Biden administration. This is largely under the Trump administration.
Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House. They want to raise $5 trillion and spend in the next month. You have a maxed out credit card, and they want to get a new limit to go max out another one. The only people that will get any blame for this is the Democrats and their management. We've watched crisis after crisis, from the border to Afghanistan to now putting our debt into crisis.
Plus, the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti is resigning over the handling of Haitian migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. In his resignation letter, Daniel Foote called the policy of deporting asylum seekers back to Haiti, quote, inhumane and counterproductive. Haiti is struggling after a deadly earthquake and the assassination of its president earlier this year. More than 4,000 Haitian migrants remain at the Del Rio Bridge in Texas. Since Sunday, the U.S. has chartered flights expelling about 1,400 Haitians back to their home country. More flights are scheduled in the coming days. For more, let's bring in Stephen Portnoy, Mariana Sotomayor, and Marianne Levine. Stephen is CBS News Radio's White House correspondent. Mariana is a congressional reporter for The Washington Post, and Marianne is a reporter at Politico. Welcome to all of you. Stephen, let me start with you. This coming Monday, the Senate votes on a stopgap government funding bill that already passed in the House but faces stiff opposition from Republicans. Here's some of your conversation with White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about a possible shutdown and the pandemic. Let's listen.
Years ago, in 2013, when there was a government shutdown, Tom Frieden, who then led the CDC, described that period of time as one of the worst in his tenure at the agency. 8,000 CDC staffers, he said, were furloughed. Do you expect a similar dynamic to play out?
Well, we are taking every step we can to mitigate the impacts of a potential shutdown on our pandemic response, economic recovery, or other priorities. The fact is, shutdowns are incredibly costly, disruptive, and damaging. Direct public health efforts can generally proceed during a shutdown because they're exempt, and that is certainly our intention. And large swaths of the federal government coming to a screeching halt would certainly not be beneficial to pandemic response.
So, Stephen, if you will, clarify the press secretary's answer there. How is the White House preparing for a potential shutdown?
Well, Tanya, we are a week away from the end of fiscal year 2021, and Congress has not yet acted to extend government agency funding beyond next Thursday. So today is a matter of routine. The Office of Personnel Management, a week before a possible shutdown, is sending word to all the federal executive branch agencies that they need to dust off their contingency plans for the event of a funding lapse or a shutdown. And the White House says that this is something that would occur in any administration at this point if government funding is winding down. The question I put to Jen Psaki today was about the impact this could have on the two most important health agencies when it comes to the response to the pandemic, the CDC and the FDA. I specifically referenced Tom Frieden, who led the CDC in 2013 when there was a government shutdown. Years later, he did an interview in which he described a very painful period for that agency. He said 8,000 CDC workers had to be furloughed. Laboratories were shut down. So the question for this administration is if it will follow the guidance that was then in place in 2013 when there was a government shutdown, or whether, as a result of this current pandemic, the Biden administration will reinterpret the rules when it comes to who is deemed essential and must report for work versus who is deemed non-essential and would be ordered to furlough. You heard Jen Psaki say that those who are involved directly in public health efforts would be deemed essential, which I took as a signal that this administration is going to do what it can to interpret the rule broadly, to say that many more people at the CDC are deemed essential than perhaps in shutdowns past. But we won't know the answer to that firmly until we see the written guidance that comes from the Department of Health and Human Services.
All right. And Marianne, Democrats say they have reached a deal with the White House on a framework to pay for the president's $3.5 trillion social spending package. What more do we know about it?
About what this framework is, but Democratic leadership is saying that this is a significant step forward in the ongoing negotiations on their $3.5 trillion social spending package. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said today that the White House, as well as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee and the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, have come together on a menu of potential options for how to fund the social spending package. And so it's a significant step forward, but there are still questions about what is actually on this menu of spending options. And many rank and file members were not even aware that this was going forward today. So I think there's still a lot of open questions about what's going to be acceptable to Senators Manchin and Sinema, who are the key votes in the Senate on the moderate side. And so we're still waiting for more details about what exactly this framework is.
And Mariana, House Speaker Pelosi still wants a Monday vote on the infrastructure bill, but progressives are saying that date is arbitrary. So what's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, there are still a lot of question marks, and it almost feels like the questions that we had earlier in the week are ones that we still have and don't have answers to. And as of right now, you said it, it seems like there will be a vote on Monday. However, there was a bit of change in Pelosi's voice today when we asked her if that vote is still going to happen. She reminded there's still many days till Monday, basically leaving an open question whether that vote is going to happen. But, some things to know about her. She doesn't like to put votes on the floor that she knows will fail. And as of right now, progressives in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, there are almost 100 members. Almost half of them are already willing to sink this bipartisan infrastructure bill to make sure the promise is kept, that BIF, as we call it here, that bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as the reconciliation $3.5 trillion bill, can pass together. So as of right now, that is likely to happen. It will fail as of right now. There are at least 8 to 10 House Republicans who will vote in favor, but of course that is not enough to save that piece of legislation. Now, if it does fail, it is likely that they can still bring it up for a vote later on. And when that is whenever they're able to iron out a number of differences, both on policy, on spending, pay-fors, and price tag that are making up this $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
All right, several days until Monday. And Stephen, after the U.S. envoy to Haiti quit earlier today, the White House is responding to criticism over its treatment of Haitian nationals. Let's listen.
First of all, they're not deportations. People are not coming into the country through legal methods. And again, our policy process has continued to be the same with Haiti as it is for anybody coming through for the irregular migration across our border. I'd note, as I did yesterday, that as we've applied our border restrictions, as we've applied our immigration policies, there were more than 90,000 people who departed the country, who attempted to cross our border in the month of August. That was even before we saw the horrible photos that we saw of people gathering under the bridge. There is a process that is in place as people, whether they're coming from Haiti or any part of the world, goes through.
Stephen, what changes is the administration considering in response to this recent crisis?
Well, Jen Psaki today ruled out a report, and she struck down a report that the administration is considering sending migrants to Guantanamo. But it has been reported that some of these migrants are being sent to other cities in Texas, Laredo, El Paso, as far as Tucson, Arizona. The Department of Homeland Security reported today that roughly 4,500 migrants are still living in this sprawling tent city right there under or next to the bridge in Del Rio, Texas. About 1,400 of them have been expelled from the United States directly to Haiti. What the administration has not been able to do is provide an accounting for the rest, and perhaps as many as 10,000, or roughly thereabouts, migrants that the administration has not provided an accounting for. Press Secretary Jen Psaki acknowledges that some of these people have claimed asylum. They may have presented themselves as members of a family unit that entitles them to certain protections. And as a result, she says they've been placed in alternatives to detention. So in some cases, they've been issued notices to appear at an ICE facility at a certain date to continue with their immigration process, which could lead to them being granted some permission to stay here, or it could lead to their being ordered to be removed. Now, here's an important announcement that the administration made today. Given the pictures that the world saw this week of Border Patrol agents on horseback trying to prevent migrants from reaching the shore in Del Rio, Texas, essentially to force them back into the Rio Grande, this administration has decided that horses will no longer be used by the Border Patrol in Del Rio, Texas. The administration also had to respond to Daniel Foote, the now former U.S. envoy to Haiti, who said in his resignation letter that the treatment of the migrants in Texas was something he was so disgusted by. He didn't want to even be associated with the U.S. government. And so he resigned today, saying that the expulsion of these Haitians direct to Haiti only compounds that country's misery. The administration's response is to say that Daniel Foote failed to share his concerns about the migrants internally and instead chose to resign.
All right. So, Marianne, all of this is highlighting the need for immigration reform. But earlier this week, the Senate parliamentarian rejected Democrats' attempt to put immigration reform in their reconciliation bill. So where does this immigration reform go next? When will it be debated in Congress?
It's a tricky question, and Democrats are still plotting their path forward. I spoke to Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin today, who acknowledged that immigration reform remains an uphill battle. The Senate parliamentarian's ruling on Sunday was much more expansive than Democrats expected. Her ruling basically said that Democrats can't include a pathway to legal status in their social spending plan. And many Democrats viewed that widely as the party's best chance to get immigration reform this Congress, given that bipartisan talks are currently stalled. So right now, what we're seeing is Democrats are trying to come up with some type of plan B that the parliamentarian might approve, that they can include in the social spending package, which they can move along party lines in the Senate. But it's not clear what that plan B is. One suggestion is potentially changing a registry law in which you could change the date at which a person who came to the United States, who's undocumented, could apply for legal status based on good standing and based on being in the country for a certain amount of time. But whether that passes muster with the parliamentarian is still unclear. A lot of Democrats privately acknowledge that the path to legal status is very slim and seems very unlikely in this broader $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
And Stephen, President Biden travels to Chicago next week. What is on his agenda there?
He's going to Chicago next Wednesday to talk about the impending rules being issued by this administration to large employers that they require their employees to get vaccinated. The administration believes that this is going to be a very important step in helping to see to it that people who have not been vaccinated yet get vaccinated. As far as particular details on exactly what that trip's going to entail, we don't have those yet, but at least we know the president is going to continue taking this case for vaccine mandates on the road.
All right, Stephen Portnoy, Mariana Sotomayor, and Marianne Levine, thanks to all of you for joining us. We appreciate it.